I, Rachel.
I, Ryan.
I, Rachel.
I, Ryan.
I.
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 I. We're the I podcast. Your hosts, Rachel, I, Ryan, and I, Rachel. I, Rachel, how are you?
I'm good.
I as well. So, just one I will do.
One eye is sufficient acknowledgement, Ensign.
Rachel, we are actually the YumYumPodcast, a podcast that has the ultimate amount of yum energy. The yum, of course, is from the iconic character Commander Naan, who may or may not have had a line of dialogue in the episode we're going to be covering. And of course, the episodes of television we are covering. Rachel, what show are we talking about? Who's Commander Naan? What's she from? What's all this about?
You are forcing me to rewatch Star Trek Discovery, and we are in Season 3 territory.
We are in Season 3 territory. But, Rachel, knock knock.
Who's there?
Julio.
Julio who?
Julio from the Contrarians podcast. Are you going to let him in?
Yeah, I suppose so.
All right, Julio.
As long as he says I.
Julio, come on in.
Aye, it is me.
Aye, Julio.
It is I.
Aye, Julio. Aye, Julio.
Hi. Hi, it's Julio from the Contrarians. Finally here to, I don't know what I'm doing here, Ryan. I kind of feel like we're going to be arguing a lot.
Maybe. Or maybe we're just going to keep saying I over and over and over again until the end of days.
It's kind of like a poem.
Yeah, it's kind of like a poet. It's kind of like poetry. It rhymes.
Like a haiku?
So, yeah, it's like a haiku. Let's not even start there. Julio, welcome to the show. Are you feeling yum yum?
I always feel yum yum.
He always feels yum yum. You heard it there, Rachel. Always feeling yum yum. And of course, you're feeling yum yum because you are joining us for a discussion of an episode of Star Trek. But before we get there, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your podcast for those who aren't as familiar with our interactions on Instagram?
Hey, Twitter too. I think that we've interacted.
You mainly give me the hot
much.
takes on Instagram, though.
Yeah, which is not very practical because I think that it's a lot easier on Twitter. But, well, I am a fellow podcaster. I'm a podcaster like you guys. But my show is not about Star Trek, although we did cover one Star Trek movie a while ago. We just basically focus on Rotten Tomatoes scores, and we grab movies that have a fresh score on Rotten Tomatoes, and we talk about them like they're bad. And then we do the opposite with movies that have a rotten score on Rotten Tomatoes, and we talk about them as if they were good. And then on the second half of the show, we tell you how we really feel. So we actually had you guys over for the original Secret Life of Walter Mitty, which was...
Yeah, you had me at least.
Yeah, you guys, I meant like your other partner in crime, not your non-Trekkie Star Trek partner. But yeah, and then I've recorded with you, Ryan, and your other podcast a couple of times. It's always been a good discussion, even though I think we clearly, by now, we know where our sensibilities differ. Though we've never like discussed Star Trek at length, like I said, beyond Instagram posts.
No, and it will be interesting to actually talk about things a little bit more open and honest, because when you talk about things on social medias, you, in a way, talk, especially when you do it on your own podcasting platforms, you kind of talk about it like the personas of your podcast in a weird way, and there's like fun internet jabbing at one another, but you don't get like the fullest perspective on what the other person actually thinks of the show or any of that type of... Yeah, or dive deep into it.
Just like Adira and Michael did.
Oh, Rachel, we'll get there. But Julio, what are some movies as examples that you've given the Contrarians staple to?
Man, we just finished our sexy 90s thriller arc of sorts. So we did Showgirls, we did Jade, we did Indecent Proposal. All those are rotten movies. So in the spirit of the show, we were talking about them as if they were great works of art, and that was interesting. And we were on the other side on fresh ones. We did recently. We did RoboCop.
My favorite erotic thriller.
Madam, you have suffered an emotional shock. I will notify a rape crisis center.
Julio, you and I have talked on the social medias about Star Trek, but I still don't have a full grasp on what's your relationship and history with Star Trek as a whole thing and Star Trek Discovery.
Well, in a way, listening to your show has really made me downgrade how much of a Star Trek fan I thought I was. Because I thought I was, if you'd asked me a year ago, I would have told you, oh yeah, I'm a pretty good Star Trek fan. But really, now, I've kind of come to terms with the fact that I've watched maybe, I would say, 40% of Star Trek stuff that's out there. And really what made it hit is that listening to you guys talk about it, talking about how Discovery doesn't match with your expectations of what a Star Trek show should be, that comes from just the vast amount of a Star Trek experience that you guys have that I really don't. And so basically, I've seen every Star Trek movie except for the very first one and the very last one. I own Star Trek Beyond. I never got around to watching it. And I actually mean to watch the very first Star Trek movie sometime this year. That's good. That's a minor goal. I've seen the original crew movies a few times. I would say Wrath of Khan is probably my favorite out of all of them.
Oh, you must have loved Into Darkness when it just remade it.
I did actually, Ryan.
Get out. You know what? I was going to give you a chance, but get out now. I'm kidding, of course. People love that movie for some reason. What's your feelings on Discovery, though? How did you get into Discovery, considering that you had a somewhat familiar relationship with the other Star Treks beforehand, I imagine? Or did that kind of come during watching Discovery or after? Where did Discovery penetrate you?
Well, it's mainly Next Gen. That's really... growing up, I had Next Gen. Next Gen would play on TV, and I watched, episodes here and there. I remember thinking it was cool, and then a few years ago, I want to say it was before we moved into this house, but it was Star Trek Next Gen was all on Netflix, and I started going through the entire series. I didn't finish it. I think I made it to halfway through season 5, but I watched it all in order, and I was, I like it. I mean, if you ask me, I guess everybody kind of has their Star Trek crew, their Star Trek show, Next Gen is my show. So to me, Picard, Riker, Data, Worf, those are really the Star Trek that I grew up with.
So you've danced around. When did Discovery get you? When did it sink its teeth into your veins?
Whenever it first came out. I mean, I don't know how much of a big deal they made of it in Australia, but here it was the flagship, so to speak, of CBS All Access. So it was their first big major production. It might be their only production actually so far.
I don't think we even got bus ads for it.
Yeah, they just kind of plonked it on Netflix here and just went, it's there. Here you go.
Yeah, no. Oh, and actually, you know what? I just remembered that because Michael is played by this actress that was in The Walking Dead. And so we used to watch The Walking Dead, and basically when it was kind of a big deal when they wrote her character out of that show and they made a big announcement. It was because she'd been cast in the new Star Trek show. So I remember having that awareness. And then we already had CBS All Access, so when it dropped, we just started watching it. I want to say it was kind of like a thing that I was doing with my wife for the first few episodes, and she kind of dropped off, and I finished the season on my own. And then, I mean, you remember? I mean, I remember liking the first season well enough.
Yeah.
And then not really getting into the second season, just because it's the thing with Star Trek Discovery is that it's a show I like, but it's not a show that I'm passionate about. And so, I mean, there's plenty of media that I'm passionate about. And you know this, Ryan, and if you don't know this, Rachel, you're about to find out. But I'm just a big MCU fan, for example. And it's if Marvel, Disney drops something tomorrow, I'm watching it tomorrow. But with Star Trek Discovery, I mean, the second season dropped. I'm like, okay, I'll get to it.
So you actually paid for Mulan?
Yeah, no, that's just Disney. MCU's different. He wants Iron Fist season 2 or 3.
He said Marvel or Disney. He did specify. He said both.
He said both.
which are separate entities, even though both are, Disney incorporated.
Let Julio enjoy Artemis Fowl, okay?
Yeah. I just wanted to test how far the Disney nerd strength was.
I mean, it's stronger than probably Star Trek, or at least that Star Trek. I mean, I told you I haven't even watched Beyond, so it's a franchise I like, but it's not a franchise that I have a sense of urgency to keep up with, unless something kind of puts a deadline on me. And actually, your podcast is what did that. You guys covered the first season, and you were and you started covering the second season, so that made me want to catch up. And and then I watched the second season kind of like as I was, I watched it and then I listened to your podcast, and then season 3 was the same thing where I didn't watch it as soon as it dropped, but then I kind of hurried and probably watched it sooner than I would have because you guys were covering it. And so I like the show, I don't, because I don't have that such a strong connection to Star Trek as a franchise. I think that I'm allowed to look past a lot of its flaws as a Star Trek show. And its flaws as a regular show, I also can kind of like shrug them off because there are things that it does that I like enough. So, and here's the other thing. I mean, on my limited Star Trek experience, it always feels like there's a lot of give and take between the franchise and I, as far as what I let it get away with and then what it gives me. So even something like Star Trek Next Generation, like I was binging it, like I said, a few years ago, and to me, it felt like there were a lot of bad episodes of really silly moments that I had to get through before I got to the really good stuff.
Data, you are fully functional, aren't you?
Of course, but
How fully?
in every way, of course. I am programmed in multiple techniques. A broad variety of pleasuring.
Season 3, are you one of the people that is like, it's the best one? What do you think? What's your opinion on that?
Well, I think so, yeah. But that's, I mean, on a story level, I think it's the best one. But also I think on a confidence level. Now, of course, season 4 could come out, later this year or next year, and they could do another, 90-degree turn, and the show could be something else again. But to me, it felt, at least watching it, beginning to end, season 3, that it felt like maybe they'd finally figured out. That's probably the biggest problem I've had with Discovery. I think that I imagine if you talk to somebody behind the scenes, like you had a frank conversation with them, they would probably agree. Is that it feels like a show that 3 seasons in, it was still figuring itself out. It's not. I mean, it's kind of obvious. They basically were telling they were a different show every season, right?
And
they were
different showrunners every season.
And that too. I mean, that's
sometimes 2 or 3 at the same time.
But it would be cool if that was the plan, right? I remember, going back to Walking Dead, right? I remember for a while there was a showrunner that his mission statement was that every 8 episodes the show would reinvent itself, and that would keep you on your toes. But that's not what's happening on Star Trek Discovery. At least it doesn't feel like it's intentional. It's more like
it wasn't sustainable for The Walking Dead either. After a while, people have left that ship behind.
Oh well, that's I think I left it after a while, but for a good while, it felt like it was I'm like every 8 episodes, it was a different show, but there was a purpose behind it, and because there was a purpose, there was a plan. It felt like there was some sort of structure with Discovery. What I feel. Even when I like it a lot, is that there's a lot of course correction, and I think that's the thing that I'm kind of willing to give him the leeway for the course correction, as long as we end up in a place that's better than we were before. So, and I think I told you this like over Instagram. I'm like, if this means that we're going to kind of moving forward ignore some things that I wasn't a fan of, like if Ash Tyler doesn't get referenced again, I'm fine. That
if 2 whole seasons of the show are completely perfunctory and you don't need to watch them, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, because it's better than the alternative. What's the alternative? That we're saddled with 2 seasons worth of continuity that nobody knows what to do with, So if I have to choose between those 2, I'll be like, all right, let's go with the fairly fresh start, and just pick and choose what we can salvage out of those 2 seasons. Which, I mean, I think there is something to it. I don't want to get too far ahead on like our discussion of like actual things that happen in this episode, but I think that there is even even when you have 2 seasons in the past that are less than successful, that are mixed at best, I think that the cumulative effect of having all those stories having had happened and having spent time with those characters, it ends up affecting season 3 mostly in a positive way. And I'm thinking mostly of the crew, like the
yeah,
the bridge
you got a very
crew.
different take on it than our previous guest, who basically was like, you can start at season 3 and not have seen the first 2 seasons, and it is completely clean for them. So you've got a very different take. But talking about saddling us with things, you saddled us with the episode of discussion that we're going to be talking about. Could you let us all know what the episode is and what IMDb has to say about it?
I'd like to clarify, I settled myself with that episode. You guys were going to do it no matter what.
Yeah, but you were like, I want this one.
So we're doing episode 4 of season 3 called Forget Me Not. And the IMDb...
Oh, I won't forget it, no.
Do you want me to read the IMDb synopsis or not yet?
Hit us.
All right. So the IMDb synopsis says, Burnham and Adira visit the Trill homeworld while Saru's efforts on the Discovery to help the crew reconnect yield surprises.
That is the plot. Rachel, when we watched this episode originally, this was one where we had watched it in a chunk. We watched the first 2 episodes in a chunk together, and then we left it for a few weeks, and we watched this one with People of Earth and the one after in one sitting, because we weren't like, we're going to wait week to week. We let them spread out and just kind of watch them. And surprisingly for a Star Trek podcast, we didn't really get spoiled on any details online, surprisingly. So when we watched this, Rachel, this was the one in the middle.
Yes.
What was your relationship and feelings on it that first time round? Do you
I
remember?
it being boring and stupid.
Oh, what? Why? How could you feel that about one called Forget Me Not?
So I remember the Trill stuff being mostly boring.
Yes.
And feeling a little bit stupid, but, you know, there's patchy enough lore with the Trill and the symbiotes that kind of got away with it. And I remember us both getting annoyed that they were calling them squids and not worms, which is a pedantic thing, but, but you know, it was important to us.
It was one of those things, yes.
It was just like,
so you weren't a fan of
and then
it.
all of the stuff with the people on the ship, I was like, well, this is gonna mean nothing in a couple of episodes.
So you mean like this is going to lead to nothing?
Yeah, particularly when
But Detmer flies the ship real good.
the sphere data activates.
Oh, don't even get me started on that. Jesus.
Yeah, and we were just like, oh wait, they're gonna do something interesting with it, and then rewatching it, we were like, no, they just did the Discovery thing, and they ignored the ideas.
Yeah.
And they just wanted to show things go boom.
I remember when I watched this one, the only thing that stuck with me, the only 2 things, and this is a testament that each plot had a thing I remembered. And as I mentioned this, I don't want us to dive straight into these hot button topics straight away, but the one thing I remembered from the Trill plot was, wow, they really marketed that we were going to have a trans character for the first time on the show, an actual trans actor, and they're dead before the show even starts. And that they're going to be a ghost throughout the whole season. I remembered that. And I remembered how confused I was. I thought that we had learned this lesson with Hugh already, but okay, let's see where it goes, I guess. But I remember that from this episode. And the other one is the sphere data coming to life momentarily to tell Saru what to do, and thinking, oh God, that's going to be a huge plot in the season. You can't just have the computer of the ship's computer become alive and not deal with it. Little did I know that they were not going to deal with it, but hey.
The sphere data was transmitted here for us to protect it. It lives on within Discovery. As we are now inextricably connected, perhaps now it desires to protect us.
Julio, you chose this episode, so what was your history and relationship with it, and why did you choose this one out of all of the ones?
So really, the main reason I chose it was the Hugh factor, because it's one of my favorite, segments on your show, the Hugh there, and I have agreed with every single thing you guys have said about the character of Hugh. Even though, again, as we've established, I'm a lot more forgiving in the sense that I just I roll my eyes at everything that they've been doing, but I'm still I'm willing to just give him another chance and be like, okay, let's kind of put everything behind us and see what you do with Hugh this season. And I picked this episode mainly because even though it's not one of my favorite episodes of the season, I think that those come later in the season. I remember very vividly, actually, the cold open and even the feelings throughout the episode that they actually had an idea, like a concrete idea of what to do with Hugh as a character. That I was like, all right, now he sounds like somebody that has a purpose in the ship. He sounds
perhaps like a counselor, even.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that they started setting up earlier in the previous episode, the episode before that, where he's just now somebody that listens and somebody that seems to be a little more aware of.
Don't you remember him in season 1? He was always listening. He was smiling and nodding. They set it up.
We've come a long way. I mean, but also, this is something that kind of maybe stood out to me because of you, Ryan. Because I think on either on Instagram or Twitter, you told me, yeah, they never do anything with the fact that he died and he came back and all that stuff. But I think that they don't really dig into it as much. But it is part of his character. They
acknowledge it a little bit more in this season.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really feels like when I hear him give his monologue and I see his behavior, I can make the connection. I can see that, well, this is somebody who died and came back to life. I am glad that they don't devote an entire episode to just really keep digging in that particular storytelling choice, but he is somebody who has achieved, like, I think a little bit of he's a little more zen than the rest of the crew. And what he does in this opening when he's describing, I mean, it's very Discovery, so of course it's very super dramatic and very
exposition heavy.
Very heightened, but
yeah, slow-mo skipping, yeah.
Well, the way that he describes the crew when he says that it's just a crew of overachievers that suddenly find themselves not being able to deal with the fact that, well, they're in the future, and I guess what they used to measure their performance against, it's gone. The Federation's gone, so they're feeling kind of adrift. And he has that line where he says, the 5 words that keep us going is when we find the Federation. I mean, that's like, it's cheesy and it's very overwrought, but it was like, I get it. Like it works as far as painting the picture of where the crew is, where the ship is right now, what's the challenge that they're facing, and that it's a challenge that he seems suited to solve.
So you mainly chose this episode, it seems, because our influence of our podcast getting you to think about Hugh as a character, and then season 3 seasons in, they give him a solitary, like they give him moments, and rather than what the actual episode is as a whole, which is the stuff on Trill and Saru trying to figure out how to deal with the crew, what you kind of latched onto for something to discuss with us is the fact that we have a whole segment about how they don't give Hugh anything to do, and then finally, three seasons in, 3 years in, they gave him something to do, and you're like, now that is an episode worth discussing.
I mean, I think that the Hugh aspect of the episode, it's definitely the most interesting, followed by the depiction of Saru, like, I guess a continued exploration of Saru as a captain that's still getting his bearings as a captain. That side, I like a lot, like, the Saru story, the Hugh story. I'm with Rachel. The Trill stuff is just like, I think it worked for me better the second time around, just a little bit, but overall.
Yeah, I felt the same way.
Rachel, you are not as familiar with Deep Space Nine.
No.
Julio isn't as familiar with Deep Space Nine. I am. So I know what the Trill are. I know how they work. I know what their culture is. I know what the deal is. Would you say, either of you would say, a part of the disconnect of the Trill plot is it is one of those things in which it does feel like you should already know some of these things, or is it just the writing overall?
I don't think so, because the show is very clear about what the expectations are around the Trill, and they are very much, this is the way that it should be, this is wrong, and I think it conveys all of that information rather clearly, and also with the one-off TNG episode where Riker becomes a host for a little while.
But that's you knowing about that. This is like Discovery's never had the Trill before. Here they are. It's a weird idea.
Yes, but I'm saying, like, it does a good enough job on its own, and with the little supplemental knowledge that I have, it kind of melds nicely with it. I don't like using the word nicely in association with Discovery.
Julio, what do you think on this notion? I know we've had some friction and some agreements about how there are some aspects of Discovery that does kind of do the thing where it relies on you knowing the material already and also pretending like, no, you don't need to know it. What do you think about this? Was that at all a play for you in this Trill plot?
I don't think so. I mean, because at least not on a plot level, because it wasn't confusing. You know, it's like, it's not like I didn't understand what was happening and that kept me at a distance. I do believe that maybe if I knew the Trill from Deep Space Nine, I would have come into, when I see them, I would have had that emotional connection of just like, hey, this is something I know. And that maybe would have made it a little more interesting. But my main problem, as I was watching it last night and I was just kind of trying to figure out why doesn't it work for me, it's just that I realized that I just don't have the patience for that kind of Star Trek conflict. Certainly not when I felt that there was more interesting stuff happening in the ship. That's one. More importantly, though, and I think that this is where it gets to the crux of why I think this is a fascinating episode, if not necessarily a fully successful one, is that I found it very frustrating that, to me, the episode seems designed, the adventure with the Trill, the whole trip with Adira down to their planet, it seems to be designed to be a Hugh adventure. Hugh and Adira going down there, bonding, setting up what's going to happen later in the season. And even watching it the first time, not knowing what the plan was for the rest of the season, I was just frustrated that they sent Michael. And mind you, I don't dislike Michael the way that you guys dislike Michael, but I am not... I think the show definitely wants you, like the ideal Star Trek Discovery viewer has to love Michael, because Michael is the center of the show. I mean, I understand, you know, Michael is the protagonist. It's not an ensemble. It's like Michael is the protagonist of the show. And so, of course, whenever there's an important mission, she's the one to go. But if this was like Next Gen, and now I'm doing the thing that you, Ryan, do, where I'm like comparing it to other Star Trek shows.
Okay, I'll help you out. If it was Babylon 5, go on.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I have to use Next Gen because those are the characters I know. But, you know, this would be the episode where they send Dr. Crusher with Adira, right? Yeah. And it would be fine because there used to be, you know,
or Deanna
Dr.
Troi.
Crusher episodes. Exactly. You would send somebody that seems suited for that mission. And it's crazy because the first, 15 minutes of the episode are setting up Hugh to be that person. And then they have this really weird scene where Hugh just passes the torch and it's like, no, Michael, you should go. And they never really make a good case as to why that should be, other than, well, it's Michael, so.
Dr. Culber is a pretty smart guy. I've trusted him with my life and I'd do it again. And he thinks I should escort you.
Well, I like him.
Rachel, you weren't a huge fan of this Trill plot. What was an aspect of it that we haven't talked about that really was grinding your gears? Because when we were watching it, there was this one scene in which you had the Trill leaders, the council, just standing in a line, and each one of them would go one after the other, giving explanations of why they're not going to allow the help to happen. And you were like squeezing your fists and shaking them. What was going on?
Classically, Star Trek is a lot about talking.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot about ideas. And it felt like they thought that they were doing that thing, but what they were just doing was a giant exposition dump that was split across characters.
Yeah.
And characters that we don't know and we don't care about. And also, I just found it lazy in other ways in terms of, like, visually.
Yeah.
Because the leader is all in
Yellow,
the
red,
white, but the yellow.
Yeah.
Which mean, like, is associating her with the yellow-robed people who are against Adira.
Right.
And then the red guy is the good guy who helps them out.
Yeah.
And just the fact that they're on either side, and visually the red guys are on physically the side facing Adira.
Yeah.
And Michael, who is looking for a fight, is facing the yellow guys. I really hope I got these colors the right way around.
Yeah, you did.
And because she's gonna oppose them.
Yeah, I agree. They split it over so many different characters, and my issue I have two major ones in that particular scene and those characters in general. And Julio, I really hope that you can help me touch upon this first issue, because Rachel and I are so entrenched in the show that we are, like, so close to it that we may need someone who's a little bit more detached. I thought the acting from all of the Trill people were really, like, stiff, wooden, and overarched. It was just so overpronounced, and, like, it was like,
This
really...
is what a leader is like.
And, you know, like, I'm like holding my hands in the air in, like, a giving pose because I want you to help me. Or the evil guy, and he's, like, raising his eyebrows all the time in, like, a sinister manner. And that was
And he's got fists.
And he's got his fists in the air. Did you feel that at all, Julio, with these guys? Or is this just kind of us being so deep in the well of Star Trek Discovery's overarching acting that we kind of just are looking at this too strongly?
I think I did notice it. It didn't bother me in that sense. I mean, I think that anytime that we run into any alien character, I'm more likely to just allow whatever the actors want to do, because my take is just like, okay, well, that's how the Trill are. But still, as far as performance goes, to me, the problem was that I just didn't find them interesting. They were just kind of, because they're all very much the same. You have, like, I don't know, 3-4 people there, and they all feel kind of just, it's just a blur, and they were not really keeping my interest. I just, that's the whole thing with the at least the first part of the Trill story. I just find it kind of boring. It's just, I mean, it's a conflict that I've seen before in Star Trek, and I've seen it done in a much more interesting way, right? It's like, we arrive at this place where the natives have a certain set of beliefs, and we have to figure out a way around it.
There's a TNG episode that this reminds me of very strongly, and what makes some TNG episodes work in this is what are stock standard characters of, you have the leader who's the middle mediating person of the world, you have the conservative fundamentalist, and you have the progressive free thinker, right? But instead of just making them those bland stock standard types where the progressive person is like, please help us, you're the savior, and I recognize that you're good, and the conservative one is like, they're heretics and they're blasphemy and this is evil. In other shows, including even Star Trek Discovery, like with the New Eden episode, you flesh them out and give them some kind of internalization that makes them understandable enough and not just straw man arguments.
We have no idea why the one that helps them really helps them,
because
other than he wants to save the society and the other one wants to keep it pure. But it's just like, well, why do they feel that way? Do they have any personal investment? Do they remember who they lost in the burn? Did they try and secure a host and killed the host? Is that why the conservative one? There's so many other things that you could add to make it more interesting. Do they blame the Federation
or Starfleet for causing the burn, thus causing the issues internally within their society? In a TNG episode, there's an episode where Riker is undercover as an alien looking in on this race that are about to achieve warp, and he gets captured and they find out he's an alien. Meanwhile, Picard finds this out and he's trying to cause diplomatic relations with the president of this race. He has one senator guy who's like a conservative guy who's like, they're infiltrating our society, this is evil. And then you have the progressive lady who's like, but they're obviously benevolent, they're obviously doing this out of good. And you understand all three factions of that world's society within 40 minutes. Here, they're just stock standard, and that's what really drove me crazy, because at the end, the villain guy, what changed his mind? He just, at the end, the lady from Schitt's Creek told him, just hold this, and then he just stood there. Nothing changed his perspective. He just stopped having a perspective, and we had to forget he had one.
He's polite. He tried to kill them, but he will give them towels.
Yeah, he will give them towels.
Because you don't want to be rude.
Yeah.
Or maybe he's just really keen to get that sacred ooze off them.
The milky ooze. Yeah, the Trill plot as well is also like, there's just not a lot of stakes going on there, because they just quickly solve it with extreme violence and then just saying, no, let us do it. And that's not a particularly interesting story to watch. While on the ship, there's lots of different things happening there that several characters have to deal with in their own ways. And it's not just Giorgio aims a gun at the crew and says, be happy now, and then they're all happy. But that's what Michael's plot is just basically aim a gun at the Trill and say, abide by us. And that's just so lazy and boring to watch.
Where are the caves?
Never.
Fine.
This episode has a lot of what I generally call toddler logic. I want a thing. I'm going to go get the thing.
Now push over the other baby to get it.
Yeah, it's not mine. I'm not going to share. I'm the special one.
When
you're going to go play this game? Oh, no, you should go play it. Take my spot, Michael. You're more important.
And evidence of this writing is also they manufacture that the opposing force just abides by the will of our main character because they have the protagonist powers, which you mentioned, Julio, which is Michael's just like, oh no, Adira, they're gone. And the Trill are like, oh, that's bad. How about you, the human who knows literally nothing about our society and our culture and our ways, hop into our sacred waters and figure it out because we don't know how. What do you mean you don't know how? It's yours.
You're kind of her friend, right? You might be able to find her.
Go in there and go have a dip in our sacred pool.
Doesn't he even have that interesting thing of, well, you know, if they both die down there, that kind of solves our problem.
And that frustrated me too. It wasn't like Michael gave a very logical Vulcan human Starfleet diplomatic approach to make them convinced that she should dive into the pool. It was they just as characters, it felt like the writers made them realize, oh, we're not the main character, you are. Go in the water, main character. It is your way of doing things. Fuck our culture. Fuck our understanding of our own system. You, the foreigner, you, the literal person who's just come down from space who knows nothing about us, you go in there. Because you're the main character. And it's just like, well, okay.
I mean, but you could justify it. Like, if I had to justify it, I think the ideal scenario would be where, yeah, you have to send Michael there because out of everybody in that scene, she's the one that has the most connection to Adira. You know, or at least that's what the Trill would assume.
Or mention the xenoanthropology thing.
Yeah, something.
Yeah, I mean, we know that she doesn't, but, you know, the Trill wouldn't. The Trill would assume that, okay, well, you came with her. She obviously trusts you. You're the strongest candidate to get her out of whatever she's gotten into down there. And I would have, you know, one of the Trill go down with Michael. So you have somebody that knows the environment and somebody that supposedly has a connection with Adira. Again, it's kind of a wasted opportunity because this never goes anywhere. I think that maybe I would look fondly onto this subplot a little more, or you know, if the relationship with Adira and Michael was something very special going forward in the season, but it really doesn't. I mean, Adira's connection,
and they only just met each other practically in this episode,
right? Yeah. So again, I don't want to harp on it, but if it was Hugh, then it would make more sense again because it already felt like Adira had she said it earlier in the episode, right? Okay, well, I trust him. Michael made a comment on it, and it would be just unusual because we're not used to seeing people say that about Hugh, I guess. It would be just so much better, even if you kept most of the other things the same.
Well, Michael did say when she found out Hugh died in the first season that he was her best friend on the ship, and then I played all the times they interacted, and it was less than 40 seconds. So, they're best friends. Hence, Hugh wasn't even in the last episode to welcome her back on the ship after being stuck in space for a year. They're just such good friends. Hence, Hugh had to come in and tell her, you're the main character, you're the protagonist. Sure, it would make logical sense and emotional sense and thematic sense and series-long sense if I went down there, but like the Trill, Hugh says, you're the main character, it is your responsibility.
Adira's had almost everything she's depended on stripped away. I think you understand that.
I think you do too.
There's his character, Adira, which we haven't really talked about them at all. They're in this plot, but would you say the plot is about them?
Well, it should be. That's the thing, right? And
it should be, so no.
As we were talking about it, well, on the surface it is. The problem is that there's no big character decision, right? That's
Adira is a MacGuffin.
Yeah, but I mean, everybody, including Michael, right? Let's say that you wanted to really make it about Michael. Even Michael doesn't have to make a decision for anything to get fixed here. The way that things work out is that Adira simply has to face the memories that were lost, that were locked away. And the only way to solve the problem is accepting the memories. So that's not really a whole lot of... there's not really a character turn there, which I think that's why it doesn't really work. I mean, I like the character. I like Adira. I actually think the performance is pretty good. But in the flashback, I mean, the flashbacks that we see, they're affecting enough. Knowing very little about these characters, I remember watching them, I'm like, man, that sucks. They're young kids. One of them gets killed, and then the other one has to make this really big choice. But that's stuff like that. That's in the past. I mean, that doesn't really affect the story in the present. So it would be different if, in order to get out of the situation, to access these memories, Adira had to sacrifice something, and then you would be like, all right, well, now it makes sense, and now it's really about her, and now it matters. But it was just kind of I mean, it's like you guys were saying, it's just exposition in the end. It's just we're going down into this lake or whatever so that we could learn about her past, but not really see much about her character.
The quilt.
Yeah.
The quilt would have been a very easy...
like a physical thing to let go of.
Yeah. Symbolic gesture.
Or to play Julio in the room, which is to be a chaotic devil's advocate. Julio, you could just say that this isn't a character turn, but a character setup and reveal, because what happens that what you wanted literally happens in the last episode. Adira has to let Gray go when Gray's a hologram, but then no, they don't, because Gray's still around, and they're going to resurrect them in some way, shape, or form next season. So it doesn't even happen. What annoys me...
That would have been fascinating. Oh, yeah, I keep using that word when it's like things that didn't happen. But yeah, can you imagine if really what had to happen in this episode was that in order to get to the memories that Michael needs, that Discovery needs, Adira had to voluntarily let go of the memories of Gray. So that means that going forward, all the time spent with their boyfriend is gone from her mind. But the important stuff, the things that matters to Discovery, is the prize. Now, that's a big choice that a character would have to make, and then come out of it a different person, and that would have repercussions going forward. So, I mean, I think that the setup was there, and they kind of dropped the ball.
Yeah, I mentioned before one of my issues with this plot. And I guess, this is something that I bring in, but I'm not the only one who does. Star Trek Discovery keeps doing the thing in which it says, we're going to have the first openly gay characters that are in a relationship, or we're going to have the first this, and this in Star Trek ever. And you say, finally. Like, it shouldn't have taken this long. We're in the age in which we expect that these things should be better handled. But then, oh, Hugh, he's not really a character, and then they break his neck and perform the bury your gaze trope. I've already got into that. It is the bury your gaze trope. Just because they resurrected him doesn't nullify that they did it. The male sexual assault thing, again, introduced it and then retconned it and said, no, it wasn't that. They keep doing this, and when they said, we're going to have a non-binary character, and we're going to have a trans character played by actors who are those things in real life, I was thinking, great, this could be really interesting. And then I watched the episodes, and I'm perplexed as to why Adira is given the female pronouns from the beginning. And then I was even more perplexed when we do get the episode in which Adira decides to say, hey, my pronouns are actually this. And that's why I haven't been saying she or her in this, because to me, there was no real reason why they couldn't have been non-binary from the very beginning. But my main issue when it comes to this particular episode is I thought we were going to have a trans character in the show. No, they're dead immediately, and they're a ghost that comes in and out of the show and has very little impact and very little character of their own. And it made me go, wait a moment. Didn't we have this exact same plot with Hugh when he was dead and he kept interacting with Paul and then they had to go save him? And I'm like, wasn't that something that I thought that was something that they would learn from, not repeat? Am I the only one in this conversation that has this feeling? Or is this something anyone else feels? Am I just looking too much into this? Am I feeling too much into this? What's your opinion on this, Rachel? Because obviously we've talked about this issue many a times before, but do you feel similar here, or is it different somehow?
Yeah, I think they just wanted to do a coming out story because they didn't do one.
Oh, for the non-binary aspect, yeah. But with having a trans character and they're dead immediately.
Yeah. But they don't bring up that he's trans.
No,
in the show.
But you know.
But we know that because we know the actor, and we've seen things that the show has said that kind of reveals their intention that they're going to bring that up as part of his character eventually.
Yeah.
But we don't trust that they'll actually do that. So there's that. Yeah, it just feels odd. And because it feels like it's a move towards representation, but it doesn't feel like it's trying to be good representation.
But isn't it the same move that they did with Hugh, practically?
Yeah,
Except for he's dead at the beginning, instead of you got a few episodes where they smiled and nodded in the background and then killed?
Well, we don't see the burial, so then it doesn't count.
Right. Julio, what do you think on this issue?
See, I came to it from a completely different angle because I had no idea. I didn't know the actors. I didn't know the hype. I took the story as it was presented. So when you take it that way, it's really not, that's not the perception, right? I mean, to me, Adira was introduced as a female and Gray was introduced as her boyfriend. And that's basically how I took it. So, just starting there when he dies in the flashback, to me, it was just like, all right, well, it's a tragedy, but it didn't feel like this huge, a statement, one way or the other about a trans character, because I didn't know it was a trans character. I will say in a couple episodes or so, when Adira makes a transition and she decides that she prefers to be referred as a them, right? And then from then on, the show does it, and I wasn't. I don't know. I just remember being kind of. It felt clunky in the way that a lot of stuff that happens in Discovery is clunky. It didn't feel mean-spirited.
No, I'm not saying mean-spirited, but it is like, why didn't you just start it here?
But there's a distinction, because I think that there would be it would be so much worse if you had people that were, if there weren't good intentions behind it. I think that I would be more like ruthless about it, but I'm like, they're trying,
But even removing if you did or didn't have aspects of the hype behind it, on the basic level of story, isn't the story of Gray being the dead ghost lover of a character that only they can see and interact with and feel, isn't that just, and then then they're setting up for next season, they have to go save and resurrect in some way. Isn't that just too familiar of a beat that we've already seen in the show that most people did not enjoy?
Well, see, I think that as you tell it to me now, I'll be like, yeah. When I was watching the season, because I had no knowledge of any of the behind the scenes stuff, to me it was just like a story. I mean, yeah, the ghost thing, you can see the parallel with Hugh's story, but if nothing else, I would say it's better executed in season 3. I mean, I think that there's the interaction between Ghost, Gray, and Adira, I think actually has something to do with the story and something to do with the characters, as opposed to whenever Paul saw Hugh in season 1 or season 2, it just kind of felt like, well, we're kind of marking time because we don't want you to forget that Hugh is a character, or we don't want you to be too mad that he's dead. Whereas like here, again, I felt from the very beginning that there was a plan, that there was that there was a reason why she could still see him, and that there was going to be some sort of payoff, which there is, And what I was going to say is, as badly handled as the Stamets and Hugh relationship was in season 1, I mean, 2 seasons later, I think that we're at a decent place. Like, and so part of me wants to say, it sucked, but it was kind of worth it, because season 3 of Discovery has a pretty decent portrayal of a gay couple that we didn't have before.
Well, yeah, because
universe.
They're actually allowed to be in same scenes together and interact. Well, it took 2 whole seasons for that it took 3 whole seasons for that to happen. It's mystifying to me that it took 3 whole seasons for them to get to what is now what you would have as the setup point of a not like them, well, technically, yeah, I mean, they've just reconnected as a couple, but, like, when you start a show and you're like, here's a pre-established couple, this is what I imagined, not what we got, but that's a whole separate issue. Yeah, I guess also the difference between us and you is you find Adira an interesting character in any way, shape, or form. I have no problem with the acting at all. Like I've said many times in our discussions, I don't have a problem with a lot of the actors, if any. It's more the characters, and it comes down to the writing, and it comes down to the direction. Like, we like Book. Don't think he's a well-written character, but he's such a charming performer that it's captivating enough. But Adira as a character, I don't know what Adira serves to the greater function of the series, and as a character on their own, I don't find them that interesting. And I don't even really remember much about their character other than they are there.
Okay, I'm an art genius.
Talking about things that don't need to be here, Detmer's PTSD story is still continuing in the crew are not feeling okay. I enjoyed this story far more than the Trill stuff, and not the Detmer PTSD aspect, but more the aspect that Saru, again, is having to deal with what it's like to be a leader and a captain in a different way. We saw in episode 2, he had to deal with, like, physical threats. Now he's having to deal with internal and mental threats. Rachel, what did you think of Saru's story in this, and how it furthers his overall arc of the season?
I thought it was mostly fine, but I got distracted and really hung up on the fact that he goes back to the computer, which is something that in the first season he was supposedly, like, he'd learned and he'd gone beyond. But
yeah, and the second episode of this season demonstrated he learned from that too.
But he was going back to the drawing board instead of using his offices for help and support.
Yeah.
And then I just got angry when the sphere data activated.
Well, talk about some positives, because you said that you really liked, there was a funny line from Saru that you enjoyed, where it was about, what was it? Hugh was going on about how everyone's so stressed if there were mice in a cage, they would be chewing off their own tails.
Yeah, and he's like, well, myself and my tail, thank you.
Yeah, and it was a nice, dry delivery.
It was cute, and it felt like that belonged in a conversation that only those 2 characters would have.
Look, the dinner scene's a whole thing. I don't like how that was handled, but honestly, I had no issues with the Saru aspect of this plot. except for the computer telling him what he needed to do. When at the end, Hugh is like, hey, you learned your arc? And then Saru's like, actually, I didn't learn my arc. A computer told me. That, I don't feel that as at all satisfying, and knowing how the season plays out and how little the computer being alive comes into play, it really just feels like, why did they choose that element to him? Why did they not let him actually have a completed arc within this singular episode that then amplifies and attaches to his overall arc? Because in the second episode, he did fulfill his own things. He had help from others, but he still fulfilled it on his own. Even in People of Earth,
and with
he
his
fulfilled
principles.
it on its own. Yeah, and his own principles. In this, a literal Deus Ex Machina comes in and says, this is what you need to do to solve the problem. And he even admits at the end that, yeah, I didn't solve this. And I just don't, like, everything outside of that, I enjoyed. Yeah, like the dinner thing, I don't like how it was handled, but on the structure, that's the low point of his story, and he has to rise from there. I get it. I get it. But this, I don't get what the choice is there. Julio, you're on the same page as us in terms of you do enjoy seeing Saru take leadership, and again, his leadership is different from most because most captains we meet are fairly experienced officers in terms of actual leadership, whether they are new to the chair or they've been in it for years, but Saru is different like this. How did you feel about Saru's plot in this and how he tried to handle the crew? And if you want to bounce off anything we said.
I honestly, I hadn't really thought of the ending being an issue until you brought it up, and I'm like, yeah, I can see that. But I think that the reason it didn't bother me, it would definitely be a lot more satisfying if Saru had a very decisive win at the end of this episode. I definitely would have liked it if he had found a way on his own to figure things out. It would have been great if the computer hadn't fed him the exact solution, if the computer had just dropped a hint and he had extrapolated, let's show them a Buster Keaton movie. But still, I think that just the fact that I guess to me, the win is that he doesn't give up, right? He has a disastrous dinner and then, he perseveres, he comes out on top, and he is, I think, self-aware enough to know that it wasn't just him, that there's more going on. So it's not like a complete loss. It actually, to me, there's character here. It's not like the Adira part of the story where it was just like, things have to happen, and they happen, and there's exposition, and that's it. Here, there was a struggle. This was a character that was trying to be a leader and tried things, and things didn't work out, and then he tried something else, and that worked out. Not a whole lot of it didn't really come out from it wasn't his entire idea, but it was something. Watching it, I just had a good time watching Saru being captain, which is kind of a consistent theme for me in season 3. I love Saru as a captain. I love what he does. I mean, and we've talked, online, Ryan and I. You like Saru more than I do, as far as
he's the only reason.
Or rather, you're more
the
disappointed with the way that the show has
it.
treated him. Yes, I'm okay with the arc of Saru throughout the show. Like I don't hate the fact that he evolved so quickly. Because, when it happened, I figured, all right, let's see where they take it. And, they took it to a place that I found interesting in season 3. He's going to be a captain.
When you said evolved, I was like, yeah, character arc. But then I remembered, oh, no, that's right. The guy shoots darts out of his heads. Oh,
the literal evolution, Ryan.
I actually forgot.
No symbolism, no metaphorical nature, only literal.
I forgot because this episode, I agree, it does a really good job of showing Saru's ongoing evolution and character journey. But again, I only have the problem with he didn't solve it on his own. Somebody had to come in, and I'm not saying I would have preferred it if through his leadership he got someone else to give him a sparking idea, but instead just some nonsense comes in and says, here's the answer. a non-character, something we don't have any relationship to either. Oh, I've seen that short trek, Calypso, I know what that's a reference to, but that's not a character. And but I agree, like, I thought it was really strong, and I thought Saru did a really great job, and I like seeing him interact with Hugh, with Tilly, with Paul, with Giorgio, and seeing how he has a different dynamic with all of them. It really adds to this fully fleshed out nature of his character, while sometimes Michael, it feels like she interacts with everyone the exact same way. The exact same way. Her relationship with Adira, what's different about it with her relationship with Tilly or Paul? Talks to them pretty much the exact same way. But with Saru in this episode, the way he handles each player in the room is specifically unique to them and how he feels about them and what he knows about them. Hence, his issue with Detmer is very hard because he doesn't actually know Detmer that well. Who does? Michael. Michael knows Detmer because they, I struggle with the dinner scene though, because that's where the whole episode falls apart for me, because it's like, why is Hugh here? Why isn't Michael here? Why is Giorgio not the one causing the trouble? Why is Detmer causing the trouble? What is this? Why does Detmer have such a raging hard-on against Paul, who those two rarely, if ever, interact?
And they previously set up a tension between Paul and Tilly.
Yeah.
That's even referenced by Hugh in that scene.
So the dinner scene is, to me, terribly written and the dynamics are all wrong and all off. Rachel, when the dinner thing happens, we've talked about on the episodes, Detmer's PTSD just doesn't feel genuine or real, and not just in a real life sense, but in a narrative sense. It really does feel like she just starts acting like she's possessed by an evil computer.
Feels much more like a possession
than
and a ghostly presence that takes over her body and makes her voice go deeper and
monotone and rhythmic. Yeah, like, we know that there is no mystery illness or like mysterious evilness possessing her. We know that, but when we watched this scene, you and I both stated, it still feels like, is she possessed by control? Is something in her software, in her brain, in her augments? Like, is she being taken over? And we both know that that's not the case. Why does it still feel like that, even though we know for a fact that this is supposed to be a mental illness, this is supposed to be PTSD? Why does it still feel like that?
Because we want the decisions to make sense.
And what do you mean by that?
We want the fact that, like, her voice goes deeper and then it feels like a switch has been flipped, not that she's losing control or her ability to maintain composure. It just feels like she's like, okay, I'm gonna let fucking loose now. You asked me, I said no, and you forced me anyway, so this is what you get, bitches.
But people with PTSD can be very unstable, so she's just being unstable. It's just like real life.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure every single one of them has a shift in pitch and tone.
Maybe, but...
And, is spiteful when asked to make up a haiku.
But I think it would also... our issue is, we don't know who Detmer is in any way, shape, or form. We've seen her suffer through massive amounts of tragedy before this and not at all been affected. Yet this has affected her so greatly.
It's because she fell over the console.
And hit her head. But no, it's because everything that she loved has been left behind. But the thing is, we don't know what she's left behind because we don't know anything about her as a person, as a character, other than she's the pilot.
Didn't her husband die as well as Ariam's?
No. She's never been married, I don't think. I don't know.
I thought she could lost somebody at some stage. But
We've all lost somebody. She lost Giorgio as well because she was on the Shenzhou as well. Like, I struggle with this dinner scene because I look at it and I say, here's my time management brain. Here's my condensing down brain. Detmer, get rid of that. You know who should have had a PTSD angry plot? Giorgio. She's literally someone who didn't obliged to be on the ship in the first place. She got sucked into it. Nobody's thanking her for actually saving the day. She's
setting up her further medical problems.
Her further medical issues. And then she actually gets to leave at the end. Also, she's a character in the show who would actively antagonize people for no reason. And thus, it would actually be furthering the thing. But Detmer, it's like, lady, why have you got an issue?
We've got to get somebody on the bridge crew to have a bit more of a character.
Why? Why? Why does it matter? You know who I'd like to have a character? Adira should have a character more so than Detmer. Who cares? Who cares? Like, they wasted they waited too late to give Detmer a character because here's where I struggle.
But Owo didn't get one until later.
Yeah, but Detmer's been here from episode 1. Detmer got physically
been here pretty long.
Hey, listen. Detmer got disfigured in the Battle of the Binary Stars, which in part was due to Michael. At no point...
In part?
Well, yes, in part, not fully, but in part, was due to Michael. Did Detmer have any issues with Michael about that at any point? No. Michael is then, in turn, in part, responsible for her friend Ariam getting sucked out into the vacuum of space and dying. Does she have an issue with Michael about that at any point? No.
Does she have an issue with Fanan actually pushing the button and injecting Ariam? No,
but then Michael is also responsible for the reason that they have to travel into the future and leave everything behind. Does she have an issue with Michael about that? No. Who does she have an issue with? Paul. Why? Because he does the spore drive stuff and he thinks he's really cool. Yet we've never seen them interact. We've never seen those two characters have any form of conflict against one another. So when you have this scene in which the character with PTSD is acting unstable and lashing out, it's so hard to even find a single shred of connection because it's like, I get it. She's mentally unstable. She's lashing out. But you still need, from a narrative sense of the breadcrumbs and the steps leading towards this, or the audience who are used to everything being a mystery, thinking, oh, she's been possessed by something, and she's a sleeper agent, or she's got control in her brain. That's what I get so fucking frustrated with this scene. Like, I can see, like, if Michael was at the dinner table, if she directed her hatred at Michael, it would make 100% sense to me and I wouldn't be sitting here complaining. But she's lashing out at Tilly and at this, and I'm like, I don't know who you are, Detmer. I don't know how these steps got to here. I don't understand anything. And every other piece of trauma you've encountered on the show, you weren't a character, so they didn't give you any form of trauma about these things, even though you should. Julio, I'm going into a massive, massive rant about this dinner scene. Did you love the dinner scene? How do you feel about Detmer's PTSD? Is it basically like King Tut from the 1960s Batman, in which she hit her head and now she's a different person?
I mean, we agree on a lot, right? I don't think that it didn't, surprisingly, well, here's the thing. I agree that it derails the scene, which up till that point, up till she has her meltdown, I think it's really good. I think that it's doing a really good job of just setting the atmosphere of Saru kind of navigating this dinner, and the crew is joking around, and you get a sense of family. It's doing its job. The meltdown derails it, and I think that where we disagree is I think that the episode manages to recover enough at the very end to where I can just on the Detmer front, you're right. There's two separate issues. One is that her actions make no sense, and then the other one is that on top of her actions not making any sense, they pair her with a character that is having his own thing. Like if nothing, I believe Stamets. His crisis is at least somewhat foreshadowed, right? Because earlier in the episode, Saru tells him that they need to figure out a different way of doing the jumps because
and his crisis
he almost died once.
Makes sense with him and Tilly having a conflict, but again, like you're saying, it's a separate thing. It doesn't tie in anywhere with Detmer,
right? And but as far as Detmer, I am not against. If this had been the moment where we learned about Detmer as a character, then that's great. I wouldn't mind that this happened. It's just on the execution because you're right. She's gone through all this trauma. Why hasn't that cracked her? And this, is the thing that broke her. this was where we would have gotten an answer if it was well executed, or we would have started to get an answer. But I like the scene that follows or towards the end when she comes looking for Hugh and she tells him, she basically admits that she needs help, and they're like, all right, well, we'll talk about it. And it's a shame that it kind of gets dropped, and the way that story is resolved is just that, well, later in another episode she flies and she's fine.
I flew us into the future. I landed this ship. I landed Discovery.
Yes, and we barely survived.
Oh my God, stop it.
Rachel, I remember when we watched this, you stood up when Hugh opened up the episode with a supplemental log.
Yeah.
I mean, why is that a reaction that happens?
Because that's a very common thing in the rest of Star Trek for the opener to be
a log.
It's them dictating their log usually. That's why we get the
and it's the expo dump.
Audio, yeah. And it catches us up on things and sets up the episode. Mm-hmm. And it was just like, oh, we're getting Hugh and he's doing a really Star Trek-y thing.
He's never been able to do either of those before. Be in the show and do a Star Trek thing.
It reminded me that, he's not the chief medical officer, which I often forget.
For some reason. Could you explain that to us, Julio? Why isn't he the chief medical officer? Is there any reason he serves the practical function of it?
I mean, I don't know. I don't know the politics of the Federation.
The answer is
Starfleet. Maybe
you don't know.
Maybe he missed he didn't have a high enough score. I don't know. When
maybe he was too quiet and he was nodding too much.
A man that is intelligent enough to make those connectors in under 24 hours for Stamets to interface
hook up to the spore drive
with the spore drive is intelligent enough, I think.
I'll give you the answer. I'll give you the answer. It's because he likes opera. And they said you can't be a chief medical officer if you like that opera, buddy. No, we won't allow that on this ship.
It's because of Stamets. Because Stamets is they went to a dinner with the guy that was in charge of making the promotion. And Stamets
and he got the gazpacho soup and he sent it back to get heated up, even though it's supposed to be served cold. Yeah.
You know what could have been actually interesting?
What?
If it was a holdover from Lorca. Like, Lorca demoted him because of a mirror universe reason.
Rachel, forget about Lorca.
I know. That's why I said it could have been actually interesting if they did something. If they used the context of the show and had lingering applications and purposes, it could have been.
I really liked Hugh in this episode. I made this segment because I've always been rooting for Hugh as a character. I think Wilson Cruz is a very charming, energetic presence, but the writers never allowed him to be a character. And when they did, it was truly embarrassing stuff. Season 2, I think, is an embarrassment, and I think Season 3 realizes that because they reference it so little, yet you ought to. And in this episode, they referenced his death in a way that was light and energetic enough. Future episodes of Season 3 kind of treat it like a joke, which is very interesting. But I really liked him in this because it felt like, oh, this is what the character should have been, and this is what the character is. 3 seasons in, I finally understand who Hugh is, what he wants, what he's capable of doing, what his ideology is as a professional in his profession, and I still am struggling as to why they don't allow him to do stuff in this episode, because really, he should have been on the planet with Adira. He really, if not that, he should have been the one to talk to Saru more so about the issue and help Saru spawn the idea that saves the day at the end, if not anything else. My thing with Hugh in this is, as much as I enjoyed having him here, all he did was walk over to other characters and say, "You have a problem, do you know that?" And then at the end saying, "Hey, you solved it, good job." He didn't get to do as much in this. Like, he got more scenes, he got to interact more, but I still want him to have a plot and actually write it from beginning, middle, and end.
You want agency from your characters.
He has agency in this, but he's not allowed to have an actual character arc within it. He is the guy who inspires other people to have a character arc. He's the guy that says, "No, Michael, I'm not allowed to have the plot. You are. No, Saru, I'm not allowed to have the plot. You are.
He's so generous. He's such a generous character.
Well, he's not a responsibility hoarder like Michael. He's a responsibility giver. Hey, you're overloaded with responsibilities. Have some more. Because I don't want to have any because the writers won't let me have the plot. I'll inspire others. Like, I'm being very harsh, but I still really enjoyed Hugh. I understood him. He had good comedic moments, good sincere moments. It really showed off Wilson Cruz's acting ability, and it made me understand why they cast him as this character in the first place all those years ago. And it, in a way, it also infuriates me that it took so long to get here. And will the rest of the season play out with more of this? We'll have to see as the episodes go along, but I do fondly remember this episode as the one as well that did give Hugh a character and something to do, and I am happy with it, but I still wish that he got the plot himself and actually got to do stuff himself instead of being the guy who hands the baton to the others. That is an issue I have. Julio, you picked this because Hugh got stuff to do. Tell us about how you feel more so about the Hugh stuff, and do you agree, disagree with where Rachel and I are coming from?
I agree. I think that by now, because I've kept bringing him up throughout our discussion. I mean, this, to me, him and Saru are what make the episode work above everything else for me, even with all its missteps. To me, it was kind of a triumphant moment to finally see Discovery, the show, kind of figure out the character or show me that they had figured him out. So the expectation that was set with that opening sequence when he has a voiceover and kind of, sets the stage for what's going to happen in the episode, that was ultimately met. I mean, I would have preferred it if he had been the guy, like you said, leading the episode, just really the guy running with it. But if the purpose of Hugh in Discovery was this going forward, I'll be okay with that. He's not going to be the guy going on away missions or going necessarily being at the forefront taking action, but he's the guy that's kind of like behind everybody else, helping them out. I'm okay with that as long as you capitalize on it, which I think is what this episode did. It gave you his log was very, I think, insightful as far as giving us a window into the character. And then even if at times you would think, okay, well, he's just saying something that's pretty obvious. How could you not know that the crew's stressed? I was like, well, clearly it needed to be said. Because nobody else was, I can buy that the environment in Discovery is so intense and so, just so weird in a way that you need somebody like Hugh to just to show empathy and to just listen and kind of patiently wait for you to come to him for help. It doesn't make for the most dynamic character, but if you at least settled on him as like, that's his purpose and that's the guy you're going to be, like, he's the center of, the calm center in Discovery where, I mean, just to go a little bit back to Next Gen, that was kind of like the role that Troy had, even though I was never a big fan of Troy as a character.
Nor am
but
I.
You could at least tell, like, you at least knew what her purpose was in theory, right?
Yeah.
Whereas like with Hugh, I felt like until this episode, I really didn't know, what was the role that he played, regardless of its title.
Do you think they knew, or did you think they only figured it out now as writers and as a show thing?
To me, it feels like, again, this is obviously presuming. I haven't really, other than the behind the scenes clips that you put on your episodes, I haven't really gone and look at how the sausage is made in Star Trek Discovery. But yeah, to me as a member of the audience, it feels like season 3 was where they finally figure out what to do with him as far as a member of the crew, whereas season 1 and 2 just feels like he was there to be part of a relationship with Stamets, not to be a crew member. Everybody else in the ship seemed to have a reason to be there as far as the way that the ship works, the crew works, and Hugh was not really, you never saw him do something particularly useful as far as the plot. And so I do feel like they figured him out. I couldn't tell you if that was something that they had from the beginning and they just now got around to it for whatever reason, or if it's something that took him two seasons to figure out, like, oh, this is what we can do with this character, and this is something that's missing and that he can do. So, I mean, I don't know, but it definitely, I think that he has a much clearer purpose now.
I don't think they knew what to do with him outside of like the short-term things, especially knowing that there's several different showrunners, so they all have different things. I think it's evident by he should have been the ship's counselor, not the doctor, because we rarely see him do anything important to anything via his ability as a medical doctor. The things that he does do are things that would make more sense as the ship's psychiatrist or counselor, just like Deanna Troi did as a character. Hence, Dr. Crusher wasn't the ship's counselor as well. You had two separate people, two separate jobs. And this show never really delves into the medical science all that often, so why even have a doctor character if you're not going to do that? But the show definitely does deal with, for better or for worse, emotions and emotional drama and sage advice and fortune cookie sayings. And wouldn't it have made more sense if you're conceiving it from the beginning? He would be the ship's counselor and they go to him. That could have also tied in nicely with Ash Tyler and his mental strain, so that's why he's going to Hugh. But instead, they made him the doctor because every Star Trek show has a doctor. And so I don't think they knew what to do with him until now. And now that they do, they're slowly transitioning him into the counselor role, which I think makes 110%, like it makes 100, like it makes sense. I do get frustrated though, as you can tell on the show, that it took so long and that his journey for those first 2 seasons in a way really don't matter, and they don't really matter. And you can say, oh well, his thing about being dead or whatever, but when you actually watch that story, there's still a disconnect with how it's portrayed in season 3, because season 3 is trying to step away from that as much as possible and treat it like it was a bit more of a bit more with levity. While in season 2 it was like dour, he had an existential crisis, he doesn't have his scar now. But now it's treated like, and you could say that's character growth or whatever, but I honestly am on the opinion that our guest had, which is you can enter season 3 dry and not really feel like you've missed a lot of beats.
5 words keep everyone going. When we find the Federation. It's become a mantra for the crew.
Is it time for ratings, Ryan?
I would give this episode... Boy, is it hard, because before walking into this, I did not like this episode. I thought it was boring and dull and I would not remember it, but actually talking about it and actually discussing it with Julio and with you, Rachel, I am actually struggling to figure out where my rating lies with this one.
No half yums.
It's
a yum
allowed.
Being bad or yum yum being good.
For the pure strength of giving Hugh a character and actually having Saru's plotline continuing on, although I still think the computer sphere data coming alive and no one gives a shit about it and it's never treated like it's a big deal is a major misstep, and stealing Saru's own journey away from him. I'm in a mood where I'm at least satisfied that we're getting some of it, so I am definitely measuring on a curve and being on the more positive side and giving it a yum yum.
Yum yum.
Yeah, that is the curse of the yum versus yum yum rating system. There's no gray areas. So I mean,
like Star Trek Discovery, there's no need for gray. It's all dead.
He's a ghost. So you know.
Thank you. I'm out of the building. Rachel's giving me the death stare of get the fuck out. I thought we were going to make it, there's no grey areas in this because it's all black and white, but no, I went with the dead character. Thank you.
No, to me, it's also a yum yum.
Yum yum.
So where are you going to land on this? Yum or yum yum?
I have a haiku, actually. Thank you very much.
Aye.
One eye. We're not pirates.
Sacred caves, oozes. Crew is family. Say I. And I say, yum yum.
Yum yum.
I didn't expect a yum yum from you. I really didn't. You surprised me.
I also made the synopsis for the next episode into a haiku.
Well, wow, you're breaking the rules, Rachel, because usually I read the synopsis for the next one.
Well, I can give you the haiku.
No, I want to hear you. You're really great with haikus, and you structured it. Rachel, what is the next episode that you and I will be talking about, and Julio will listen to our thoughts on probably at some point?
Next, Watch Die Trying. Federation Found. Untrusted. Must prove they are them.
Wow, that is that's kind of like how the writers write the episodes, you know? What I do know is Die Trying is the next episode, episode 5. This is Bye Bye Yum Yum, the episode. In which they try to do the Detmer plot with Nan, in which it's like, hey, you know that background character? Here's a bit of them in the final minute, and then goodbye, we're gonna forget about it again.
You mean Ariam?
No, Detmer too. Like, Detmer, Ariam, they all get these things where it's like these background characters get an episode.
Ariam's the one that we say goodbye to. We haven't said goodbye to Detmer.
No, but her plot will say goodbye soon. And, you know, maybe next season Bryce will get a story about how he feels left out of the auto antonym games. Julio,
hey, he knows Morse code, so
yes, thank you. Was that Bryce or Reese? I can't remember the difference between the two of them.
Oh, it was both of them. So the show didn't help you there.
There you go. They're the same character. Almost like we could cut down on the fat, but whatever. Julio, a pleasure having you on. I hope you had a good time. I hope you didn't feel like you had to be Mr. Adversarial in the room. I think we all kind of fell into similar type of vibes. We differed on some things, but overall, a good time. Where can people find you and your podcast?
Well, I run the Contrarians Twitter account, so if you check out @Contrarian Prime, that's our Twitter account. Our show is The Contrarians. You can just find that on every podcatcher. It is kind of like I mentioned at the beginning, the kind of talk that we had through this episode of yours is what our show is in the second half. The first half is a lot more, it takes itself a lot less seriously. We're just kind of trying to be funny while we are contrarians to the score. So, you know, if anybody checks out our show and they're like, why is he making such dumb points about a movie? That's because you have to wait to the second half if you want to hear this version of my podcast.
You have to wait to the second half to hear the even dumber points. I'm kidding, of course. I'm kidding. You guys are great. We'll link all of this in the description of our episode, and we'll promote you on our socials as well. You guys are great. We enjoy the Contrarians very much. I loved, as we record this, one of your more recent episodes was Showgirls, and the absolute disgust from the both of you about that movie was truly juicy and wonderful, and hearing you guys through gritted teeth having to say nice things about it was really, really great. Rachel, we'll be back next week, but where can people find us on the social medias?
At YumYumPod on the most common social medias, which are
Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Reddit,
and
others.
If you want to hear more from us, you can check out our Patreon, which is under YumYumPod as well,
where we talk about TV shows, other episodes of Star Trek, the movies. Maybe one day we'll talk about Star Trek Into Darkness, everyone's favorite Star Trek movie. I love whitewashing.
Well, I, like Julio, haven't watched Beyond yet, so
yeah, you can get ready to watch Beyond when we talk about it. You can rate and review us on all the podcatchers and podcast hosting sites that allow it. It is always greatly appreciated. I hope that one day Julio will leave us a review that says, these two are the most yum podcast I've ever had in my life. Aye. I hope that's the review I'll see by the end of this episode's recording. I hear him already typing it up. Rachel,
I'm literally looking at my phone because I thought I'd left you a review already.
Naughty.